People who've read my writing and checked out what I do know that I pretty consistently and enthusiastically bang the drum for a band called the Nymphs. Uh,
Hmm.
my top 10 favorite bands. The Nymphs are in there. Put out one of the greatest rock albums of all time, in my opinion. So
Yes.
you moved to LA, but before you did that, was that when you hooked up with INGER Lorre and did the Nymphs?
That is a really hilarious story because so because I was explaining how like the AOD thing, like that a lot of why I left was kind of what I was describing to you was just kind of like um I didn't see a future with AOD because this universal the direction that the band wanted to go in, it wasn't like people weren't smelling what we were cooking on the one hand, and then there was like kind of an element. It was a funny thing where like because I'd had these one-on-one relationships with each guy in the band. And I swear to God, like maybe except for Paul, but I think that Bruce and Dave, like I'd be talking to them, they're both kind of like, yeah, this is kind of maybe run this course. I'm ready to make a move, so, and they're just talking shit. But but the thing is, it's one of those things where you feel like you're talking to a couple other guys, like, yeah, I think I don't want to split. No, I want to split. I'm going to split. And then I quit, and everyone's like, what? Why'd you quit? But so I didn't have well, I had an idea about starting a band with a friend of mine, and it was exactly like what happened with Pleased Youth. Like I quit the band, then I kind of started my own thing, and then I get this call. What happened different this time was I so I'd quit AOD, and then I'd been working on my new band, and there were some ways that wasn't clicking or panning out. And I was I guess I was like 19 turning 20 at this point, and so I had this girlfriend that wanted to go to grad school at UCLA because if you go to LA and establish residence, you go like for free or almost for free or something. But basically, it was kind of like this. I was 20 years old, but it was just like a kind of new girlfriend. Very exciting part of the relationship, and it's just like she was desperate to move to LA, and I kind of felt like well, I should just, this a change of environment would be good. I was way overconfident about things would click for me wherever I went. Because I've been in Pleased Youth. I had a record out with Pleased Youth before I was graduated from high school. Like, the next summer I'm with AOD. It's like, oh, well, this is the next summer. Next summer I'm moving to LA. But what happened was, do you know of a guy named Brian Bruden?
I don't.
He was a big major New Brunswick scene guy. Are you familiar? You're familiar with WRSU, the
Yeah.
Rutgers radio station? Okay, he was a big WRSU guy. So like, but he was. So my girlfriend was good friends with him. I mean, everyone was, but my girlfriend was good friends with him. And so she's talking to him. It's like we're moving to LA, and he's like, oh well, my friend Lori is looking for her band is going to get a major label record deal, and they need a bass player ASAP. And then it was hilarious because Inger, well, it's kind of like like remember you said before when we were talking, and then you said like then Inger like whirlwinded into my life and took over my weekend or my week or my whatever year month. But it got like that because it's like he gets, so this guy Brian gets us in touch, and then Inger's calling me. And this is, again, this is like the 80s. Like this is like you're on a landline, and it costs a lot of money. And it's just this long, like, oh, we're like long lost sibling. And Inger had that. I mean, I'm sure that's what you experienced with her with people. Inger had like she really knew how to connect with people, like really, make them feel people either make them feel special or make you feel like you understand each other. Both is nice too. But like she's playing me stuff over the phone. She's like, "What do you think of this?" And she's playing me The Highway, like the first demos of The Highway. She's playing me. This is the best song I've ever written. She's playing over the phone, and then she being her, like we have a plan to move out whenever we're moving out by the end of the summer. But she's like, "No, what about now? Why does it move out like at the end of the month?" So like I sell all my records. I get a bunch of money to get a plane ticket to, and the idea is like I have a van, but I'm going to fly out and then I have a Fender Precision bass and a Rickenbacker bass. And then my plan is when I get there, I'm going to sell the Rickenbacker bass and then I'll have money. And I'm going to be there for a month trying to get myself situated. This is an insane plan. Like, and because I've met no one in person. I've had talks with Inger over the phone. I've met no band members in person. She has not heard me play. No one has heard me play my instrument. No, so, but it's like, okay, I'm going to fly to LA. I don't know any of these people for 1 month and just get this thing going. And yeah, so that's how that started.
And how long was your time in that early incarnation of the nymphs?
Well, and I might add that early incarnation in the nymphs was not even that early of an incarnation because they've been like, I mean, I don't know how many years her and well, like, do you know the guy Bobby Belltower, who that is?
I've heard the name around, yeah.
Well, basically what it is, because this to me, this is the real nymphs, is like this guy, he was the original rhythm guitar player. And she had with him, like, and again, like Inger has this attachment style. It can be kind of codependent, non-romantic yet codependent attachment style. She does on people sometimes. And but her and Bobby, they were like siblings, but he was like her co-writer, and he specifically it was more for the lyrics, getting the lyrics right, even than the music. Like it was, she always knew how she wanted the music to go. But like, but basically, it's like that whole first Nymphs album. It's mostly that's her and Bobby is credited on the album on some things, but he's of course undercredited for political and the typical bad fuck everyone over rock and roll policies of inter band the abuse. But like it's basically like the Nymphs is like if Keith Richards quit right before Sticky Fingers came out, and he's got like five co-writing credits, but like some other guys on the record. But anyway, um, but he played with her out here in some other projects, and they moved out there. Like they went through a bunch of band members. Like it was one of those things. It's these two people that are trying to put a band together. So they had gradually like it was Alex and Jeff, who were in the band that ended up on the final record. So they had landed on those guys, and then Bobby was there from the beginning, and then there was me, and then after I quit and got replaced, Bobby was actually the last one to get replaced. But basically, there's a certain sense I would argue that it's like the Nymphs without Bobby, and it was kind of illegitimate. It was kind of this other thing,
Hmm.
even though it sounded exactly the same. It sounded exactly the same.
So we're talking timeline wise. This is like late 80s, 89.
Yeah, here's what it would be is like so 86 in 86 that was my senior year of high school. The Pleased Youth album came out, and then summer 86 I went on tour with Pleased Youth,
Mhm.
and then the next summer 87 I went on tour with Adrenaline OD, and then summer 88 was when I moved out, and that's when I was first joined the Nymphs.
Okay, so it was definitely that early. Um, I don't want to say I have the answer to this question, but I'm curious, why didn't you stick it out with the nymphs at that point?
Well, it's funny because it's like you can give the whole typical answers. Inger, every person that ever quit her, it's like if there's like a crazy person who is like terrorizes everyone in the band, if anyone ever quits the band, that's the reason. But I would say that it's like kind of like I was alluding to before, like like I was on stage sometimes playing pretty big shows by the time I was 16 years old. You know what I mean? Like by the time I'm on my way, out to LA at age 20, like I think I'm the shit. I don't gotta take shit from anyone. I got two albums out. I don't need, I played on more stages than this chick. Like, like and so like there was like a confrontation where it was like an argument that was stupid. But see, another thing is like, I was not always I could be indignant or like haughty or whatever. So like in other words, if I'm getting abused, instead of like just kind of go, no, leave me alone, I could also become obnoxious, and I could say something that might make her mad on purpose. You never know if that could have happened. And whatever I did say did lead her to like she like angrily pour a bottle of water over my head at a band practice, and I was like, well, that's it. I will not be treated this way. And so I quit the band, and it's like I said, I mean, history shows. I don't know, man. I could have ended up dead if I stayed in that band. Like what that thing ended up becoming. But yeah, I don't basically every time I quit a band, like I'm always giving you kind of the same like reason, like I think I, have better things that could happen for me than this. And every time it was I think in retrospect, it was before it was warranted.
Mm, mm. We'll definitely circle back around to Inger because she kind of makes
Yeah.
the appearance in your narrative. But what else did you do when you were out in LA post NIMS?
I was not in LA post NIPS. Here's what actually one thing I did do in LA, legit post NIPS, was I started a band with Mike from TMA because he was living in Redondo Beach
Wow.
and he was living with a guy named they called him Johnny O. He had like I think a crazy Greek last name, and I can't remember his whole last name, but he was called Johnny O. And I don't remember if he was in TMA. He was in some New Brunswick bands, and then he ended up in those guys. Mike from TMA ended up having some hot shit band in California that I can't remember what they were called. But long story short, though, I had reconnected with some dudes I knew from Jersey that were in Redondo Beach, and we made a trio together until I decided it was time to come home.
Mm. And so you make your way back to Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Would this be the time of the beginning of Motel Shootout?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, the first version of Motel Shootout, because like, yeah, there were several Motel Shootouts, and it's just like whatever band I cooked up, I and I wasn't even the one that came up with the name. It was my friend came up with the name. Um, just randomly, it was like, here would be a cool name. So every time I had a new band, I just always called it Motel Shootout.
So there comes a point, so you're out in Jersey doing Motel Shootout.
Mm-hmm.
The LA Nymphs thing, continues for a bit. That inevitably kind of crashes and burns. I know Inger comes back home because Inger's from Jersey. I don't know a lot of people know that, but she's obviously from Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So she comes back, and at some point, the two of you kind of reconnect, and she ends up fronting Motel Shootout for a bit, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's really funny to me how it happened. It's funny because the cosmic coincidences or whatever. But the first thing is that when I left the nymphs in LA and all that, I didn't have a great attitude. You know what I mean about the whole ordeal. And the funny thing was, I was an early adopter, as many of the hardcore slash punk rock world was, of listening to the band Nirvana. So um, I'd already been into Bleach, and I'd seen him at Maxwell's, and then I had gotten a hold of a pre-release of Nevermind. But at one point, I had like a 90-minute cassette tape because they both came out at the same time. One side was Nevermind, and the other side was the first Nymphs record.
Hmm.
So I think by the time the first Nymphs record came out, it was like 3 years ago or something that I'd been in the band. It wasn't fresh. Nothing was fresh. Like the music wasn't fresh in my mind. But the thing is like, I don't know, when I was in the Nymphs, I was, fresh out of AOD, and I'm kind of into this like punk pop, power pop thing or whatever. But, a few years later, and starting to listen to the grunge and the fluid or whatever, or whatever the Seattle thing was starting to morph into, like more heaviness. Like when I heard that first Nymphs album, I was like, this is fucking great. And I had Nevermind and the first Nymphs album on a 90-minute cassette and just listened to them on my band, flipped it over, just back to back. And I liked both albums equally. Like I was obsessed with those albums. So I had already like really just been like, appreciate, because Inger also, she has a dictatorial style of working. You know what I mean? Like she's very like, no, stop doing that. I need you to do that, like kind of thing. Um, but you realize like she really had, the whole sound in her head. As a musician, like, maybe you've experienced this, but like, creativity has levels and songwriting has levels. And you could be great at a lot of different things, and you could be great at a lot of different parts of being creative. But the kind of person that really has in their head the whole how it's supposed to be, like what the vibe is, how it feels, what it sounds like, she was one of those people. So when I'm listening to this album, it's just like, yeah, she was a visionary. Like this stuff, it sounds better than ever to me. So I had become a fan, and then so in the few years after that, um, remember the band? Do you remember the band Mars Needs Women?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, Mars Needs Women, because Ray, the drummer, he was a Motel Shootout drummer. He was in the first lineup of Motel Shootout, but we were close to those guys, Motel Shootout. So me and the guitar player, Mick Preston, we lived together in New Brunswick. And then Ted from Mars Needs Women and Sean also lived in New Brunswick. So what happens is Inger had come back to New Jersey, and she's putting a new thing together. And she just started trolling. She decided she's just going to troll clubs. She shows up at the Court Tavern with Andrew Weiss for some reason. Andrew Weiss, she had somehow shanghaied into, being somehow involved. Well, he ended up making the first demos that we did with her. So there's that. But like basically, like she saw a picture in the EC Rocker of Mars Needs Women. And then like, thought like Ted is a cute guy, cool looking guy. And he's a bass player. So she gets this guy, Ted. So and so Ted, because he was close to me, like he knew all the lore. You know what I mean? Like he knew what he was getting into. So what happened was though, then Ted, like her guitar player flakes out. He pulls in my roommate Mick, while we still have this Motel Shootout. And Mick is now bringing demos, like really primitive demos that she made herself, and then demos that he'd worked on with her, and it's so primitive, and it's just like killing it. And I'm just like, I know how this music should sound. I would work on this music. If they're ever looking to get more people involved in this, just I put me in. And that's basically how it happened because people fell out, and then well that little project became dysfunctional, and then basically got rebuilt with her with Motel Shootout. So that version of Motel Shootout that had Mick and my friend Jeff Jefferson, who ended up in the Swinging Neckbreakers after that, and a guy named Tony, the drummer, Tony DeLeo. So yeah, we had our own band, and then the idea was like we knew Inger was a psycho, but I had this brilliant idea that it's like, well, if we make sure that she has to take the whole band together, like that was my deal, like that that was my bargaining chip, is like, if you want, I'll be involved, but it has to be my band. I want my whole band in. That's it. And then the idea was like, well, then if she goes crazy, we can still be our own band. And that is really, that was naive. That was not, it's like married couple can't survive, a marriage can't survive the death of a child. Like it's too traumatic.
So I would imagine that era, that second go around with Inger ended in um, spectacularly crazy fashion. I would have to.
Uh, yeah, well, it's what, it's kind of funny because there's one level where I almost can't. Here's well, it ended horribly and brutally. Here's one of the funniest things though, because like um, someone like her, like it really is those kinds of fights where everything gets pushed to the maximum of like, it, and Richard can have this in his way too, but it's like whatever that psychology is, where you're going to fight with a person and you're just going out of your way to say things. You just want to be as mean, you want to be as cruel as possible. You want to say things that cannot be taken back or forgiven or whatever. Like there might not be real actual such thing as that, but that's what they're going for. Just like just hateful. Like, so if we got anytime we, but it was like a dysfunctional marriage where, like, you have, or a dysfunctional abusive marriage. We have these knockdown dragouts where you break up and then you get back together. But the
Mhm.
most hilarious one was because during this era, um, like I said, me and my friend Mick, the guitar player, like we were roommates. And then I was working at a telemarketing job, which I don't know if you ever worked in telemarketing, but it's not a fun job. Um, and it really was at a point though, was because me and Mick lived together, so our house was like headquarters. So like if anything was going on with the band, like from her or from the management, a lot of times from her, it was just like we were getting the call, the incoming was all time, and it was like it started to be like if I was working a 4 hour shift, it's like these 4 hours, nothing can affect, nothing can affect. So at one point, we had some kind of shit. I think what happened was this was the knockdown drag out was we were driving her home to Point Pleasant, and then she was trying to manipulate the driver of the car to stop in like a Patterson or some shit to cop dope. Just like it's really obnoxious. Because it's kind of like this was like she's getting a drive home from New Brunswick to Point Pleasant, and of course, no one's supposed to be doing heroin, but if you are, you're supposed to be sneaky, and you can't try to make the guy drive you. But like we had some kind of big, like it was a big blowout fight driving her back to Point Pleasant, and it was one of these like hatred things where it's like, okay, I'm through with you, I'm through with you, and then every time you had one of these fights with her, you'd be relieved if you thought it was really okay. This is it. Okay, finally, finally. And this is hilarious because so me and my friend Mick both worked at the same telemarketing place again in New Brunswick, so everything's walkable. And right after we have this huge, crazy blowout, Mick shows up at work while and I meet him outside on the sidewalk. And he might have sent an emissary, because there's always people on the sidewalk taking smoke breaks. He might have sent someone upstairs to get me or something to fetch me. So I come out to meet him, and he just goes like this. And he just like this is like he's saying this like he's telling you that someone was in a car accident and they're in our hospital. And this is how he says. He goes like, and, the management they got a call. Hole is playing Roseland. Courtney Love wants us to open the show, as a gesture of friendship to INGER. Now, and I don't know if you like, have like that on the back, the frenemy thing with her and Courtney, but it was really just like, we. If you could imagine that you hear this news that you're going to play, I mean, Courtney Love at this time, she's on the cover of Rolling Stone. She was the most famous woman. Like, Hole was the most biggest thing going. And just to hear this news and be like, oh no, because you have to do it. But it's just like you want a simple life, like you think you're about to have the simple life. And then the thing that's beautiful about that, because again, we had a knockdown drag out, like, just a vicious, ugly, ugly fight the night before. And then so like this information comes, so my friend Nick could visit me at work. And then later, we're home in our apartment that night. There's a knock at the door. All right. So we were in a bro apartment. So, people could come rolling in anytime. It was like that kind of, it was like Seinfeld or whatever. Kramer was always walking in. But there's a knock at the door, and it's like midnight or something. When you open the door, and INGER just smashes a bottle of wine, like on her front porch, like smashes it, batters, right? And it's just like, and she's got this evil sidekick friend with her. And then she goes, Happy New Year, shitheads. And then she comes in, and this is a time when we're all, I mean, we're doing a lot of weed and beer, and so like me and Mick aren't being invaded by. We're not sober at the time that she's doing this, but like so she comes in, and we just angrily just smoke pot and drink wine, and she just insults us until she falls asleep, and that was the reunion, and colorful character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important too, from my perspective, certainly, we don't just kind of leave it as, she was crazy. Next topic. I want to make the point that with Inger, I got to know her pretty well the last year of her life.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
reviewed her album Gloryland. It was my album of the year in 2023. And then here comes Christmas Eve, and who blows into my inbox and thus my entire life for a few months? Inger.
yeah.
Um, and yes, there are legends. You talk to certain people, that name is mentioned, and they
Yeah.
perhaps shiver a little bit. But I personally, just my own perspective, I want to kind of leave it as she was also an absolute fucking sweetheart. And
Oh, well, yeah. I should actually say something about that because that's important. That is important what you're saying, because it's like I said. Like I went on to do like 'cause that there was first I had been in the nymphs, this thing. I'm just describing this era. I was with her in at least like two other completely discrete different projects after that. And the thing was is well, all right. So here's she started going out with my brother, right? So like she became like there she became like a I've hung out with Inger and my mom at the same time a lot. If what I mean. Like she was in the family at one point, and creatively, like artistically, with her, we were on the same page. And then there is whatever that mental illness thing is, and like Richard Lloyd has it, and like whatever amount I have it or whatever. But like say, you know, there's a susceptibility to these kinds of like mystical or kind of Eastern thought philosophy. How the biggest psychos in the world are the people that get into like meditating and Eastern thought and whatever these like self-calming like ancient wisdom philosophies. Like she was that kind of person, as was I. But like in other words, like so she, on the one hand she's a total psycho, but on the other hand, like I've never I'm not well suited to just for society as a regular guy either. We looked at things a lot the same way. It's just that there was behaviors, there's things going on that wouldn't hit me. But no, Inger, honest to God, like that in my whole life of like any friendship with a female, the woman that I was really like legit best friends with no kind of romantic potential or sexual tension or anyone having a crush on each other. Like the real female friendship I've had in my entire life. And the way I got back in touch with her, it was the same thing. Like where that like when once Facebook came in,
Mhm.
one night I got really drunk and I don't know if I heard the nymphs again or something reason, or if I just had this thought because I was drunk and sentimental, nostalgic. But like I drunk messaged her just to be like, you're fucking great, and you're so you're a genius, you're creative, like love your music. I was on her, and it's funny because and then the next morning I woke up and it was really like as a sober like wake up the next day like, oh my god, I drunk messaged Inger, what have I done, was that a good idea, I don't know. And of course it turned out best possible that was the best possible thing I could have done. It meant a lot to her. It meant a lot to me for her to hear that. And and that was when it was established. We were in good terms ever since. We were in touch ever since. She befriended my wife over Facebook. And I value that. It means a lot to me that we were on good terms at the end, because yeah, she was really important to me, very important person in my life, very important person as an artist to work with, and a real one of a kind lady.
That's sure as shit, Keith. Sure as shit. I mean, I don't do it too often because, I was in touch with her a lot, prior, not too long before she had passed. And I'm not going to share any of the contents of those conversations on a podcast, but
Mm,
I don't have to tell you what those conversations were like. We
yeah,
give each other a knowing nod here.
yeah,
But they're beautiful to go through now and then, because like the random audio clips and capital letter, lowercase letter, capital letter.
Yeah, yeah. Like she has this like that. I mean, that's what you love about her because it's kind of like someone who can it just is relentlessly expressing themselves
Right.
and like her way like because just noticing it from like just seeing her on Facebook you know but just like the way that she writes with the mixture the strategic use of caps that seems like it's a lot but no she means it and it's like this is her personality like I feel her coming this feels like her I feel like I'm a little nervous I'm excited I'm interested a little nervous but yeah
And like, I'd get the notification. I'd be here at the home office. I'm like, oh, time to strap myself in. This is,
yeah yeah
it could be a picture of her dog. It could be, you know,
yeah
this epic journey. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be amazing. And I need to stop whatever I'm doing and give
yeah
my full attention because I will be better for it after the fact. That's always kind of how it was. And I think artistically, she left on an extraordinary high. That Gloryland album is gorgeous.
Yeah, well, you know what? One of her things is, yeah, I mean, you, there's stereotypes about like, someone that they have an on and off again struggle with drugs, and I have no idea what was going on with her, for the last, since the year 2000 or whatever. So, but there was always like something coming up, like because she was. I was occasionally still getting messages about like being roped into like they want to come out to LA and like there's some points when she was kind of like seeing if I might come out and help her work on the record, which wasn't realistic. But like it would be um, like I don't think it's about whether or not you're doing drugs when you have that kind of thing. She seems like someone like a kind of like someone like a Kevin Shields, from My Bloody Valentine, not from Detention, but like this kind of perfectionism, like where she has the vision of it and some kind of built-in thing, that's just going to stop her from ever getting it done because it's just like, I've been around her enough. I know how much stuff she wrote, you know what I mean, that never came out. It's like if you look at the entire body of work that she's released for how long over that much time, it's not much. But she was cranking stuff out like any kind of Robert Pollard guided by voices. I have a brilliant little idea every day kind of thing. Like she could have done a lot more, and but we do have what she did.
Yeah, yeah, thank God for that. So anybody who's watching this who hasn't heard Gloryland by Inger Lorre, I would get that record. It's not a record you listen to every day when you're doing laundry around the house. You kind of have to set
Yeah,
time for that record because it will fuck you up. Uh,
nighttime album, the nighttime record.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I'm a big Marianne Faithfull fan. I think that record was her break,
Oh,
man.
you should. You know what's funny? My wife does a tribute to Marianne Faithfull. We've done Broken English. I play with my wife, but
Huh?
I like Broken English. We've done that entire album with Barry Reynolds in the band. Like she's befriended Barry Reynolds. But
Kidding.
yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, that's all.
That was
I'm huge into Marianne, I I I,
yeah,
I have a certain magnetic pull to certain types of female personalities, and Marianne was definitely up my street, as was our dearly departed Inger. Um,
yeah,
so I kind of get it, as
yeah.
much as one can, and yeah, she Inger was going to come on this podcast, and we tried a couple times to the point where I'm logged in waiting for her to come on and she never signed in. Then I would get a message shortly thereafter, so my hair's not done, whatever it
Yeah.
was. And I think it really came down to, in retrospect, I think she said what she wanted to say with that last record. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really my impression of it. So again, check it out, people. It's extraordinary work, and I'll just say, until we chat again, Inger, rest in peace.
Indeed. Amen.